And those of the public who may have been listening to the contribution from the member who's just resumed his seat, that was Dr Paul Hutchison. Dr Paul Hutchison, who's a national member of Parliament.
I remember on the radio.
That's right. Dr Paul Hutchison from somewhere just out of Auckland. Dr Paul is also the Deputy Chair of the Health Select Committee, and I find it extraordinary that in a 10-minute contribution on a tax bill, he didn't mention the tax bill at all. I'm not all that surprised. I'd be ashamed too if I was the member. But secondly, he didn't, despite being a doctor himself and the chair of the Health Select Committee, didn't mention the $300 million hole that today's budget has left in our health budget. Any basic calculation will show that with inflation at the level it is and the 2.5% in GST which came in with the budget today, there is now a $300 million hole in the health budget just to stay still. Well, Mr Speaker, I should say that for an opposition health spokesperson, that is a dream come true in many ways, because all we have been seeing over the last few months is health cuts, and they make the job of being the health spokesperson in the opposition easier. But they don't make the lives of good, hard-working, ordinary New Zealanders any easier. They haven't made the lives of people in Otago and Southland who have had their home support cut. They don't make their lives very, very easy. They don't make the lives of the people who are terminally ill in Palmerston North, who are about to get 8 hours a day of their district nursing services cut. They don't make their lives any easier either. So I'm not surprised that the member is so embarrassed that during a 10-minute speech he not once mentioned the tax cuts or the gaping hole, $300 million hole in the health budget that was announced today. Mr Speaker, nor did he mention that the budget today was a budget of broken promises. The first one was by the Prime Minister himself when he said that GST would not be increased, and today we saw it increase to 15%. 15% increase in GST, categorically denied by the Prime Minister that that was going to happen before the election, and today we see that personal promise from John Key, the Prime Minister, broken in this House. The second broken promise from the Prime Minister and Bill English and the National Party was that they would not be increasing borrowing for tax cuts. What did we see in the budget today? What did we see in the budget today? Exactly that. Increased borrowing for tax cuts, and not even fair tax cuts. Oh, sorry, the woman from Christchurch who has taught Aaron Gilmore everything he knows about economics says, no, that can't be right. But actually you just have to read the budget. Deliver tax cuts, another broken promise from John Key and Bill English and the National Party, and the third broken promise, and I'm sure my friend and colleague, the Member of Parliament for Wellington Central, will have further contribution on this later, that there would be no cuts to public services. What are services delivered through our education system and our health system? Are they frontline services? Are they public services? And are they being cut now? They certainly are. The third broken promise. Mr Speaker, New Zealanders are actually pretty tolerant. They understand when we're going through hard times. They understand when we all need to work together, when central and local government and members of our community need to work together in hard times. They understand the needs for people to tighten their belts and do a little bit more so that our country can get ahead. But what they won't understand, and they don't understand, and what is making them very angry, is that this budget and this legislation that we are debating had an opportunity to lift New Zealand out of the recession, to give people an opportunity for jobs and to create a fairer tax system in any changes that were being introduced. But that's not what happened at all. What we are seeing is the people who are doing okay still, despite everything, the people who are in the very, very top income bracket in New Zealand doing the best out of tax cuts, while people who are on the average wage or below doing very, very badly. Mr Speaker, yesterday in the House I heard the Prime Minister announce, and it certainly was an announcement, it was news to everyone, including Treasury. He said that Treasury had told him that GST was a progressive tax. Well, actually it isn't. It's a regressive tax. It means that people who have less income spend a higher proportion of that income on items which have GST attached to it. They don't have a lot of spare money, so a higher percentage of their income goes on items that attract GST. So when GST goes up, it is harsher on people who are low and middle income earners. Actually, on the government's own figures now, we know that most people won't be compensated for the GST increase at all. Many people will be worse off. People on $70,000 a year, and that is well above the average, will be $45 a week worse off with the tax cuts and the GST increases. And Mr Speaker, that doesn't factor some other situations into account. For example, if a person is in an income-related rent house and their income goes up, as it will for many people who are beneficiaries or on superannuation, their rent will go up as well. So as their income goes up, their rent goes up, and that means they will not be better off. But when they go down to the supermarket, they won't be getting a discount, they'll be getting an increased level of GST. 41% of the tax cuts go to the top 10% of income earners in New Zealand. 15% of Bill English's tax cuts go to the top 1% of income earners. Mr Speaker, how can that be fair on people who are just getting through a recession, many of whom have lost their jobs, have had to get another job at a lower income, and they work as hard as people on the top income bracket? I was appalled when John Key said to them, wait for the budget, we are going to give the biggest tax cuts to the highest income earners, but don't get jealous, because those very, very wealthy people, they are the backbone of the country. They are the people who are important to New Zealand. Well, Mr Speaker, I think those people are important to New Zealand. But I actually think that the cleaners who work in this building are important to New Zealand as well, and as much of importance to our country as the people who are in the highest income. The average income earner, Mr Speaker, and people right up to $70,000 a year will be worse off under this legislation. Today, the National-led government squandered an opportunity to put a fairer tax system in place and create a more modern economy where people would have open opportunities. You look into the other budgets, into the education budgets, into the health budgets, more cuts to adult and community education, introducing payment for people in early childhood education who take their children there, reducing the numbers of qualified teachers in early childhood centres, leaving a $300 million gaping hole in the health budget. What they have introduced is not a fair tax system as they promised, not the $50 a week tax cut that they promised before the election. What this government have introduced is a tax swindle. They have broken three promises. They've increased GST when John Key promised personally to this nation that they would not increase the level of GST. They have cut public services and they have certainly not introduced a fair tax system. Mr Speaker, this will be a huge disappointment, will cause more unfairness in our community and a lot of